Well, today is insulation day. This is a giant roll of 3M thin slate insulation material. It's got an R value of 5, it's hydrophobic, it's flame resistant, and we've got to get it cut up and glued into the Troopy. But before we can do that, we have got to deep clean this truck. The dust, the dirt, the dog hair, it's all got to be gone so that we have a clean surface to adhere this to. So let's get to it. Now, there are a few key reasons why I want to add this insulation to the Troopy, and the first is pretty obvious. That's for temperature regulation. Something like this with an R value of 5 isn't going to make a huge difference. It's not going to go as far as keeping us cool when it's hot outside, but I think it will really help balance out those drastic changes in temperature and regulate things in here a little bit, and should have a noticeable impact. The other thing I'm excited about is sound dampening. The fibers of this 3M thin slate are supposed to be super good at sound absorption and dampening, and anything we can do in here to reduce the road noise and make the drive a little bit more comfortable should really go a long way. Now, before we can start cutting and gluing, this is the stuff we've got to take care of. We've got to get all of this dust out of here, off the wheel wells, off the walls, and we've collected a lot of dirt and dog hair and debris over our months in the Troopy, so we got to get all that out of here too. So I don't really know what the best thing here is, but we're going to start with some Windex and some paper towels and see how far that gets us. Well, I gave everything a pretty good wipe down. It's not great, but I think it's as good as it's going to get with 32 years of dirt and grime built up in here. And so now it's time to put this little vacuum to the test, this Fantic USB-C rechargeable vacuum that I just got. I'm going to try to get in here to the wheel wells, to the crevices down in the body panels, and see just what all we can pull out of here. Well, now we've got the truck clean, or at least as clean as it's going to get, and it's time to start cutting pieces off this giant roll of insulation to build a patchwork of somewhat continuous insulation on the walls. People online seem to recommend a good sharp pair of scissors to do this with, and well, I've got a pair of scissors, but I don't know how good or sharp they are. But let's just start cutting pieces off and see if we can get this done. They say this stuff is kind of like a memory foam mattress, and over time, once you unroll it, it expands to be a little bit thicker. Well, here's what a piece of it looks like. It's supposed to be, I think, about 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches thick. It's got a very interesting weave inside. It's almost like a honeycomb texture, and then you've got this black backing. And I'm fairly certain that the way people do this is you apply the glue to the white side and you put the white side up against the body panel. I think. I'm going to double check that before I start gluing, but let's see if this fits, because I really just guessed. Seems to be about the right size. The only part that's going to be tough about this is spraying the contact adhesive. So that 3M90 contact adhesive, you're supposed to spray to each side of the pieces that you're adhering together and then let it sort of cure for 30 to 90 seconds and then apply it with some pressure. So spraying that contact adhesive in here and on this piece of insulation and then getting it through without getting it all crumpled on itself might be a bit of a challenge, but we won't know unless we try. Well, I made the executive decision to cut it up into slightly smaller pieces, and I'll just really patchwork it one piece at a time here. Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. I don't know if you can even tell, but there is a coat of glue on there. We'll let it get a little bit tacky, which is probably happening right now. And you have to be pretty precise with this because whatever that contact cement touches, it's gonna stick to. So I feel pretty good about that. Let me show you. So we got that first piece in here, avoiding the door handle mechanism there because we don't want to impinge that at all. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Well, aside from the fact that the camera keeps overheating, which should tell you a little bit about the weather today, we are making good progress. Hot progress, but good progress nonetheless. What I realized is that it is a lot easier to work in smaller sections and obviously to work from the top down. So there's a cavity up here. So starting up there and coming down, this is maybe not the cleanest install ever. It's a little bit patchy, but I'm working in about 6-inch sections, just one at a time, trying to paste them up and get the seams as close together as possible. Well, it's day 2 here on the insulation project. Yesterday came to kind of an early end because I ran out of my 3M90 spray glue. I thought it would go a lot farther than it did, but really all we were able to do was the door panel, panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3. So we got 4 body panels out of 1 bottle of spray glue. So we've got more on the way, but for the time being, I picked up a bottle of 3M Super 77, which is also a spray contact adhesive for multiple materials, and I think it'll do the job just fine. We're gonna do a test square first, see how it holds up compared to the 3M90, and hopefully we can make some progress today. So from what I can tell, the differences between 3M90 and Super 77, 3M90 is the high strength version. It's slightly more heat resistant, but people online do get away with using Super 77 for this type of job, and I'm feeling fairly confident in it, and I really just want to get this done. So we're gonna go with it and see how it holds up. Well, not just like that. we have our insulation fully installed. It's probably not perfect, but I think it is going to make a huge difference. So now what was really interesting to me while I was installing this insulation was that, you know, especially in these areas, in this cavity right under the windows, reaching up in there to install the insulation, feeling just how hot that metal was from the sun hitting it from the outside. I think it's areas like that where this is going to make a huge difference. You're just not radiating all of that heat directly through the shell of the body. If I were to do it again, I think that you're probably going to get a little bit of a better outcome if you're able to use bigger, more continuous pieces. But just to make the install easier, doing sort of this patchwork approach with smaller sections, I think the trade-off there probably was for the ease of installation. But I tried to, you know, make sure there weren't any massive gaps. I cut a few real small slivers of pieces and tried to fill any gaps that occurred. So it's nearly continuous. And this is one of those cases where something is better than nothing, you know? And now that we've got all that insulation installed, we can move on to step 2 of the interior build out, which is going to be actually mounting our frames. Luckily here, I'm able to reuse a lot of the work I did for the initial build. The footprints of the core frames themselves didn't change much from my initial install, and so from that initial install, I have these M5 T-nuts already in the floor here. So from the underside of the floor, there's a T-nut with M5 threads, and those pretty much align with the frames in most places. So I'm gonna leverage those. I'm gonna use some L brackets, riv nuts into the base of the cabinet frames, into the base edge, right? So that the L bracket works. So I'll do an M5 riv nut into the frames, use an L bracket to go into the M5 T-nut that's in the floor. And I think we've got about a dozen or so attachment points on each of these frames, as well as along the back side of the frames, leveraging some of the factory mounting points. So we're securing it to the subfloor and to the frame of the vehicle as well. So these things are going to be pretty strong. Well, now I'm moving on to the final steps of processing my frames here. And the first thing I'm going to do is get this lid attached to the main box. To do that, I picked up these hinges at Ace. Well, it feels like my to-do list is rapidly getting smaller, and that is a very good thing because I'm also rapidly running out of time. We've got the truck completely insulated, we've got our frames completely built, and now it's time to cut some wood and make these actually look like cabinets. Well, I spent this morning driving all around town to the lumberyard, to Harbor Freight, and I think I got everything I need to get going on this project. I picked up a couple sheets of plywood. One of them is this 1/4 inch thick, pre-finished, I think this is birch ply. And then I also picked up this is 15 millimeter thick, or about 1/2 inch thick, pre-finished on both sides. These both have a UV resistant poly finish on them already, which I think is super nice because it sort of just saves me a step. And this will be for our big side of the flange, for the bigger spans on the bench and things, and then the 1/4 inch ply will be for the shallow side of the flange. And there's nothing structural there, so I'm okay using the 1/4 inch stuff. It's really almost just decoration. Why I have these two small pieces though is because I can't fit a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet in the back of the Troopy. I can fit about a 4 foot by 7 foot sheet. So I ran to Harbor Freight and picked up their cheapest $30 skill saw knockoff, and in the parking lot of the lumber yard hacked a foot off both of those boards so I could bring them all home. And now there's nothing left to do but to measure some stuff up and start cutting some wood. So now my plan here to make sure I end up with nice straight cuts and square pieces to fit into these frames is going to be to make a DIY track saw. This aluminum extrusion is a really nice straight edge, and I've got this leftover piece. So we're going to measure and mark where we need to cut, and we'll clamp this at the right offset for the foot of the skill saw, and then hopefully we'll be able to just run right along it and end up with a pretty straight cut. Well, now, fingers crossed it fits. This should be our first piece. Oh, look at that. It's a perfect fit, like a glove. Check this out. Oh, that feels really good. Oh yeah, no sag or anything. Oh, that's nice.
Check that out.
So my initial plan for this driver's side bench cabinet had been to use the 1/2 inch ply on top for the lid, because that's where I'll be sitting and standing to get up into the alu cab, things like that, and I just need that extra strength up there. And then on the faces, I had it set up to use the shallow edge of the flange with the 1/4 inch ply. But as I was sitting here making cuts out of the 1/2 inch stuff, I just thought, what the heck, I've got a piece that's just about perfect for this big front face, and I actually think I like it. So now I've got this ply set on the inside of the cabinet with the flange still on the exterior, because I don't want to take it apart and turn all those flanges around. I don't really hate the look of it, and I think having the 1/2 inch there for this big span again actually gives us a lot more rigidity to the overall structure. So I think that's what I'm going to roll with. And then maybe on the end face, I'll still do the 1/4 inch ply, but this doesn't add, too much weight because it's just the one panel, and I think the benefits are definitely going to be worth it. Well, I'm running out of daylight, but I feel really great about the progress we made today. We got all of the parts cut out of that 1/2 inch ply that we're gonna make. That's the lid for this driver's side cabinet. Now it's the face for that driver's side cabinet as well. And then it's the fridge platform. I still haven't figured out how I'm going to attach the ply to those flanges. In some places, maybe for the fridge platform, something like VHB just strips around all 4 sides, might do the trick. But maybe a physical fastener would be good. I was thinking maybe just drilling holes and using pop rivets. Maybe countersunk nuts and bolts would look really clean too. I gotta figure something out. Tomorrow we've got our work cut out for us. We're gonna work on the faces for both of these cabinets. This one's a little bit more complex because we'll have the switch panel here for our water pump and our air compressor. We'll have our access for our air compressor, and we'll have our water fill port as well. And then I still have these openings here on the inside of this cabinet. I've got an empty space here that's about 6.5 inches deep when the water tank is there. And then I have the bigger one over here that is still, you get that same 6.5 inch depth, but it's a much larger cubby. I want to do something with those, but I don't think it'll happen before this shakedown trip, because I don't want to build cubbies out of plywood again, because it just gets so heavy when you are making almost a full box. There might be something interesting to do with like a sheet metal cubby that I could pull together. I've got to give it more thought. I'm not sure how I want to use that space just yet. So I think that's the beauty of the shakedown trip, is I don't have to figure it out before we go. And maybe I'll even get more ideas on that trip. And then the other thing we have to finish tomorrow is that pantry cubby. So we'll get the wood cut for all of these different pieces that we need, and then we'll really be in the home stretch here. We'll get all of our angle brackets together. We'll come in and we'll actually mount these frames to the subfloor. We'll mount all of our plywood fascias to all the flanges. We'll get our electrical wired up. We'll get our water tank plumbed, and then we're gonna be ready. So I'll pick you up in the morning. Okay, so we'll go 18. We'll call it 18 by 20 on this side. And over here, and on this side, we're at 19.5 by 17.5. Okay, 18 by 20, 19.5 by 17.5. Could be better. There are some gaps, but it's good enough for government work. I like that. I think that looks pretty nice. So basically what we're doing is recreating our old one on this new one. So we need a hole for our air compressor. It's gonna sit somewhere like that. We need a rectangle for the switch panel that controls our air compressor and our water pump. And then we need a hole for our water fill port. We're not gonna do the pressure fill out of a hose bib anymore. We're gonna do a gravity fill, just because what I read about Baja is that there's not a lot of places, and really the Pan American Highway, there's not a lot of places to do a pressure fill, run a hose and get potable water. A lot of the agua purificadas are gravity fill only. So we'll do that just in case. And of course, the nice thing with gravity fill is that you could always run a hose down into it and be just fine. So yeah, that's a pretty decent fit. Well, now it really feels like we're in the home stretch here. The last thing on my to-do list is to turn this 1" by 1" aluminum angle into individual L brackets that we'll use to attach our frames to the subfloor. Well, this is pretty exciting because that should be the last time I pull these frames out and put them back in. They're going in there now, and they're going in there hopefully for good. Cross our fingers. So now here's that front utility panel on the passenger side. We've got access to our air compressor here. It's pretty easy to pull back that chuck and get any of your fittings in there. We've got our switch for our air compressor and our water pump. We've got our water fill port right here, and this is just a gravity fill port. It's got a 1" braided hose going back to the water tank. This is an area where we can either stick a hose in there and let it fill up. We can use a funnel and fill from jugs or something like that. So I think having this gravity fill port is going to give us a lot of options here. Well, now it is clear that the Troopy is far from being 100% finished, but I do think that it's just about ready to take us to Baja. I couldn't be happier with how the build turned out, and I couldn't be more excited to get down there in Baja and really put it through its paces. We ended up with a pretty great storage cabinet here on the driver's side. It's got room for just about everything I could imagine. And on our passenger side, our utilities really came together over here. We've got our water plumbed in with this new gravity fill port. We've got access to our air compressor. Our fridge sits up here pretty nicely. I have a couple of last minute things I need to do there. I'm waiting on the straps to hold it down. I've got some eye bolts that are going to go into the quick frame, and we'll just strap up to those. I also need to run the power for it, the 12 volts back from the fuse block. So a couple of things to finish up here and there, but we'll get them going, and then we'll be on the road for our couple of weeks of Shakedown in Baja. There are a few things that I dreamt up but just didn't get to finish before this trip. The big one is that perpendicular cabinet behind the driver and passenger seat. Our batteries and our inverter are framed up and they're well secured now, but we didn't actually turn it into an enclosure. We didn't add additional storage back there. It is just an open space. So that'll be a blank slate waiting for me when we get back from Baja. The other thing on this passenger side cabinet, there are still a couple of open volumes that I dreamt up some cubbies or some additional storage that I just also did not get around to finishing for this trip. But we're going to be okay to make do without that, and it'll just be another blank slate for me to come back to and really dig in. We'll have plenty of time at the end of October and into November to really get things dialed in and take our learnings from this trip to Baja, make any changes that we might have to before we're ready to set out on the Pan American Highway. I can't tell you how much it means to me to have you here as part of the journey. Your support through this incredibly rushed build process, your support through everything. It means the world to me. If you like these videos, it is a huge help to give it that thumbs up, and subscribe if you haven't already. I don't want you to miss the Shakedown to Baja. It is going to be an epic trip, and I've got the ambitious goal to hit 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I truly can't do it without your help. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, maybe share these videos with a friend or two. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. Until next time, get out and explore somewhere.